On this episode of gCaptain Weekly, John and Sal talk about maritime disasters from the Express Pearl to the Waukesha, all the way to the Golden Ray in Brunswick, Georgia. They then talk about escalating container rates and the cost to ship goods across the world's oceans. And finally, a discussion on the U.S. shipping budget, including the Department of Defense's. All on this week's gCaptain Weekly. Hi, I'm Sal Mercogliano, Associate Professor of History at Campbell University, a former merchant mariner, and an adjunct professor of maritime industry policy at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. And welcome to this week's gCaptain Weekly. We're joined, as always, by the CEO, Captain John Konrad. John, how you doing?
I'm doing great today. Sal, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, John. We were off there for a little bit. We had a little bit of time off and everything. I apologize. I had a little bit of work schedule issues, but we're back. And fortunately, the news has not stopped. So,
I thought someone from the cruise industry found our plead for a free cruise.
I was hoping,
I thought you left without me.
I was hoping for that. I was hoping for, especially with the CDC now releasing, cruise ships to go back on. President Biden signed the waiver to allow the Alaska cruises to basically proceed past Canada. Do not stop. Do not stop at Canada. Just go on, and so they can do that through February. So I was kind of hoping about that, but no, unfortunately, that was not the case. Instead, I just had some work-related issues. So, John, I thought we hit a couple of stories here that are hitting the headlines in gCaptain. So, first off, just a slew of disaster stories. I hate to say this, but just some epic ones that gCaptain's been following from the very beginning here. This is the story of the Express Pearl, which is just, for those of you who haven't been following it, this is a vessel that had loaded 25 tons of nitric acid. Express is a feeder service. They provide containers between smaller ports around the Indian Ocean, Asia, Africa area. And this vessel loaded nitric acid, 25 tons. She had a lot of hazardous material on board. They reported that the cargo had shifted. They had a leak on board with the nitric acid. They attempted to offload the cargo in both Qatar and India, and they basically said, no, we don't want this. After what happened in Beirut, they didn't want to be saddled with a hazardous material. And when the vessel arrived off Sri Lanka, Colombo, they reported fire on board. They initially thought they had it under control. And since then, it has just manifested to the point where the vessel is now sinking off the coast, an environmental disaster waiting to happen. Add to it, we have this story today with the Iranian Navy losing one of their replenishment vessels, a tanker built back in the 60s, suffered a fire on board. This is the image of her going down, sinking by the stern. There's a story also out about Mauritius and the Waukesha. Now Mauritius is trying to blame this on the Coast Guard of Mauritius for not providing warning that the ship was running into the island, which I would think would be the responsibility of the person on the bridge looking out the window to see they're running up onto an island. But obviously we're trying to turn this into air traffic control, which doesn't exist really for ships, which is an issue you've talked about a lot. Fire on board a ferry of Indonesia. Fortunately, this has only resulted in one person being missing so far. I haven't heard an update yet on that, but most of the passengers were able to get off. And then a story developing last night that you all have here was the Golden Ray is now leaking oil down in Brunswick, Georgia. And the disaster of this salvage operation that's going on, disaster in my opinion. I think this is just the worst way to go about salvaging this vessel, this slicing. So, John, obviously a lot of stories going on. And one of the things I get commented on all the time is like, man, sure seems to be a lot of bad things happening in the maritime industry. But as we say, this happens a lot. So I was interested in your perspective on that. Whichever one you want to kind of delve into or talk about, I'm happy to listen to.
I don't know where to start. I will tell you that I personally and gCaptain as well have received a lot of slack from a number of these stories. I mean, if you take the container ship incident, that goes back when we covered the MOL Comfort. And I'm not going to say who, but we had a major advertiser who left over that. And if you looked at the MOL Comfort, it was build requirements, but also the they didn't really know what was in all the containers, and the containers weren't being weighed when they put on ships. So the industry put on this huge push in order to weigh containers and that better manifest. And then it's kind of forgotten about. And then you have the I forget. There's so many. I'm forgetting what they are. You have the golden Ray salvage right here, and it was originally a Smith salvage, and one through a partner had got it. There are open 90 MARPOL domestic MARPOL rules that say that you have to have an oil spill response, and that's tied to the salvage. So everything was set, and they were going to do a more traditional salvage, and then at the last minute, the P&I Club got the Coast Guard to agree to switch salvers, switch horses mid-race. And we wrote an article, and man, there were some angry people for us writing that article saying, maybe it's not a good idea to switch salvers in the middle of the job. That, in our concern was mainly delays back then, and the delays happen, and now it's going into multiple incidents. And
September,
what was
just
the
for
other
everybody
one?
know, it was September of 2019 when the Golden Ray rolled over, and I don't have the evidence of this, but I'm pretty sure the reason the P&I insurance would argue about the previous salvage versus this salvage is this one's cheaper to do, and it's obviously easier for them to do it than to do the whole par buckling like they did with Costa Concordia, roller over and refloater. But for the people of Brunswick, Georgia, now with oil leaking out of this thing, I saw a report from a YouTuber down there, the Menorcan Mullet, who does this daily report down there, and it's horrific for this area. It's such a pristine area, and it's going to be forever damaged by this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. And there's still the legal thing working out in court between Smith and the newer salvage, and that continues to go. And then the epic, to gCaptain last year was our work on this Wakashio story. So I got a call from the former chairman of the World Economic Forum's Ocean Council. So, I mean, it doesn't get much higher than that, Sal. Like the chairman of the World Economic Council's Forum's Ocean Council. And this individual, Nishan, was writing for Forbes, and he's got a degree from Oxford and a graduate, I think at least one, maybe two, from Harvard in journalism, then worked for the BBC for years, and now is working on a big project I can't talk about, but he was like, he's Mauritian, and came and talked to me about this story and was like, what's going on here, John? And he had written these articles in Forbes, and they sounded crazy, and the industry just went and dismissed him. What was going on in Mauritius? They just completely dismissed him. But one of our secrets is gCaptain. We continually go out and we find these stories in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, and we have deeper agreements with Bloomberg and Reuters, and we pair them with maritime experts, and we help them, because some purposely try to expand the story and make it sound crazier than it is, and others just don't have the maritime expertise in-house, like the New York Times tries to do well, but they don't have the maritime. So we give them, and then in return, we'll get a link back. But these stories you've seen, they're always wrong. There's always falsities in the story. So when these Forbes, just eye-opening series of articles started coming out about what was going on, and particularly the IMO's response. The IMO is kind of associated with all these NGOs, and one of the NGOs is an oil spill response, but the NGO is supposed to be anti-oil spill response, but it's made up of all the oil spill response companies, which have a commercial interest. So they sent this on this guy, and I can't even describe how I wrote an article, but this guy he literally put his hands in the oil and was like, oil, it's nature's hand cream. And I've been doing this for 30 years, and I haven't gotten cancer. And meanwhile, Mauritius, I've been there on a ship. Most mariners who have worked in the Indian Ocean have. It's a major point. and we just kept finding thing after thing until the IMO called me and asked me to please stop helping Forbes with these articles. And normally I have to correct like the New York Times. In this case, we just joined forces with Forbes because they were right. And so many of the industry just didn't want to hear it or just assumed that it was another big publication getting the story wrong. And we got just floods and floods and floods of angry emails. Nishan got legal threats and so much more. And then just recently, the IMO's was under a major stress from Forbes and others, who I can't really go into names, or some big names from the technology side, but also from the environmental side. Nishan works with Sylvia Earle, who's one of our most famous environmental scientists, and did a podcast. So this guy's really well connected, and still got slammed, and we got slammed. And then last week, there was a whole Clean Ocean documentary came out where they actually went and they knocked down the door of the IMO Secretary General and said, what the hell is going on here? Because we had this increase in the number of incidents and we're not hitting our carbon targets. And it's just, and the pressure's really coming down on the IMO lately. And, and sorry to rain it, but I was angry at the IMO and my calls to the IMO. I said, listen, there are a lot, and they still believe that some of the Forbes stuff was wrong. And, we're upset about that, but they, I said, why is it gCaptain? Like and Sal, you did this too. We invited you in and we hooked you up with a lot of these guys to help correct the story on the Suez Canal. Why isn't the IMO doing that? Why isn't the U.S. Coast Guard and MARAD? But we're a tiny, tiny organization, and we can really punch above our weight by going in and providing this expertise and helping them get the story right and helping to show them that it's not the ship's fault and all the crew's fault, and helping with the seafarer crisis. Why doesn't IMO? I mean, they have PR reps on. Why can't they get $1 million together and get some journalists? London was the head of the maritime journalists world. There are so many former Lloyds and Fair Play reporters out of work, and to get some of these guys together and help them correct the stories. And then when someone gets it right, just fighting tooth and nail against Forbes, IMO like refusing to talk and then having these secret meetings. I feel bad even talking about it because it's one of those things that's crazier than even our crazy articles that we wrote about were. And it goes back to these incidents are happening at a greater rate. And we sound the alarm bell, you and I, at the Suez, and 6 months ago at the Wakashio. And it all goes back to the crewing crisis and COVID. And it's all tied together, and it's getting worse, and it's going to get worse. And the IMO doesn't really care, and the Coast Guard doesn't really care, and MARAD's a mess. So.
Well, and it goes to the larger issue that we talk about too, is the increase in trade. We're putting more work on mariners, smaller crews, bigger ships, not giving them the technology they need. The latest story on Wakashio, for example, is this Coast Guard officer in Mauritius. He's not an air traffic controller. Like, he's not directing ships when to turn left and right into a pattern like you do with air traffic controllers. He's working in an office, he's doing administrative work, and he just happens to have a radar scope that shows him a vessel, and
he's told with that radar scope is to look for drug runners, right? That's his directive, isn't to
not to follow 15 knot bulk carrier
like
that's
our
coming.
Coast Guard. Right. They're a lot more concerned about a few kilos of cocaine coming in than a huge oil spill.
They're looking for those small fast boats coming in off vessels and dropping cargo off, not looking at these big vessels. Now, granted, the big vessel should have triggered something, but again, that's not his job, that's not his responsibility. And again, until IMO starts setting up a worldwide vessel traffic scheme system that puts basically nations in charge of the areas around them for routing them, that's not going to happen. And you're right. I mean, when the IMO story came out last year on Wakishio, I mean, it was comical. It was so comical watching that IMO official talk. And when you look at the salvage of Wakishio versus Ever Given, for example, in the Suez, it's night and day. It's quantum leap different. of what happened there. And again, where is the IMO right now about Ever Given being held in the Suez? Again, ships been locked up there for 2 months with the crew. Where are they about this? Where are they? There's international agreements about liability. You don't need to arrest the vessel to hold the liability here. I mean, you're going to be able to get it from Ever Given and from the ship's owner. You don't have to keep that ship locked up there. And especially after Egypt had held that one ship for 4 years and the chief mate on board. But again, what we're continually seeing here is that, and again, for the United States, our rep on IMO is the U.S. Coast Guard. Where is the Coast Guard in this discussion? Where are they on this? And again, I have nothing but respect for the Coast Guard. It's complete respect for the Coast Guard, but they're not a commercial entity. They need commercial perspectives on it. But the problem is we only have less than 100 ships involved in international trade overseas.
And that was my one criticism on this documentary, which is excellent. I mean, I can't believe the high level people they got in, some serious high level ship owners in Greece and around. And,
Yep.
and I don't know how they got access, because it's hard I can talk to a lot of these guys, but it's always off the record, and to get them on the record tapes saying this stuff is just mind blowing. But, it gets back to Mr. Kim, IMO Secretary General. He's kind of a figurehead, right? And there are other people at the IMO, some of them former U.S. Coast Guard who work there at high levels. And that's the core that continues while the Secretary General and some of these political things, and the delegates kind of cycle through.
No, and I think that's one of the big issues that we talk about all the time is this. I'll show here for everybody that documentary you're talking about here, which is this one here, Black Trail, the new documentary on the IMO carbon emissions, which is, again, like you said, it's unbelievable who they got on this thing. I just, like you said, I'm the same way. It's like, holy cow, they're bringing it out. Because again, I think what most people don't realize, again, people in the shipping industry realize this, but the power the IMO has right now to drive the shipping industry in terms of propulsion. I mean, the amount of money that's being spent right now in developing alternative fuel propulsion is in the billions. I mean, it's not easy to really convey to everybody what's going on.
And the banks have come out. The banks, the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanleys of the world, the hedge funds have come out, and Shell had a recent study with Deloitte talking to bankers. The crazy thing is, the billions. See, hundreds of billions, the banks are ready. They want to write these checks. And part of the reason the documentary got so many ship owners on board is these ship owners want to spend the money, because if they have to put all this stuff on the ships and they get the lower cost loan, then their ship values go up, and the bar of entry for competitors goes up. And there's benefit. And the crazy thing is, we learned this in the Exxon Valdez. Everyone thought the ship owners would fight the double hull standards, but the ship owners were behind it, because instantly when they require new builds to have double hull, all of the existing vessels, their blue book values went up, because the replacement cost was astronomical. So ship owners were leading the charge. Let's do this. And now you got Intertanko, and you had my mentor, a man who pretty much adopted me when my dad died, Richard DeMolin, came into Intertanko and said, hey, safety is good business in the 90s, and really got them together to push these standards and get behind the Exxon Valdez things. And more recently, you have Intercargo, and the head of Intercargo is in this video, but you have Intercargo going to the IMO, knocking down the door saying, you only recover less than 30% of the VDR, the black boxes on these ships. You're not doing the job, and you're not requiring the flag states to do their job, Panama and the other ones. And we don't know what's killing our mariners.
Right.
Literally, mariners are dying in these fires and floods and everything else. And you got the ship owner. This is like, and everyone says the ship owners dirty industry, and sometimes they are, but sometimes they have to, because the rules aren't watched after, right? And people get mad at me when I say this, but they want higher rules. Can you imagine, like, the head of GE, GE polluted in my river here in Massachusetts, and there's still PCBs. And can you imagine the CEO of GE 20 years ago going to the FBI and saying, please investigate us. We need your help. Please put a microphone in our factories. Please interrogate our managers. This is what Intercargo did last year, saying, please get us these political boxes. Please investigate these disasters. And IMO said, well, that's the flag state. And you talk about, again, U.S. not having weakness, but we talked about it. Panama, Marshall Islands, and Liberia, the top three, and they're in the U.S. And Marshall Islands is a lot of mostly former Coast Guard guys, and Liberia is in New York, and Panama. I mean, these were all started by the U.S. But then it goes back to, we have no one in MARAD and the Coast Guard. They got all they're busy, like the Merchant Coast Guard, looking for drugs.
Right. Well, I'll go back to the issue you talked about just a second ago, because I do think it's an important issue when you start talking about the rules and regulations here. When you start, making the rules, Maersk, for example, their CEO came out and sat there and said, listen, we're not going to build new ships till we figure out this fuel thing. Why invest in a vessel right now that's going to
Captain
be,
Thomas just had a video on IMO, right? Saying that we want to be more environmental. But here's the thing with those. But
Maersk wants to be careful. Maersk doesn't want to jump into LNG, for example. They don't want to halfway fuel. They want to go to what is the next step. They don't want to do the half step, which is going to cost them to spend millions, if not billions, in an infrastructure plan, and then 10 years change over again. And that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing a lot of companies jumping into the fuel costs right now, to new fuels, like, hey, we're into LNG, we're into ammonia, we're into hydrogen, we're into hybrid fuels, same thing with Russia trying to open up the Northeast Passage. Some companies are sitting saying, we're not going to go into the Arctic region, whereas some companies are sitting there going, no, man, this makes it half the voyage. It saves so much. A lot of miles. And man, even if it's only 3 months out of the year, we're going to save a ton of money if we go that way. So I think that's an important element right there. I think that's one of the big issues that you see coming on. The other issue, again, comes into what you were talking about with the documentary in IMO is IMO needs to be, if they're not going to be the referee, they need to step out.
And Forbes, in my opinion, please go look at Forbes. Nishan and Forbes, the Maritime Reporter, looking at Wakashio Forbes. I mean, he must have wrote dozens of articles on this.
Well, and go back to the IMO then too. Like if you look at what's going on with Ever Given in the Suez, the Egyptians are running the show. They are putting out the information. They it's in their courts, and they're sitting there and blaming the ship's master, and they're saying, listen, we've listened to the recordings. The ship's master gave orders. This is it. Whereas the IMO should be the arbitrator. They should be the ones out there saying, okay, wait a minute, here's what happened on that bridge. Where is that statement coming out? Where's the Panamanian flag on this? Because the Panamanians got rolled.
The investigative reports from, I'm not gonna highlight, but okay, I'm gonna say it from Panama. Go read the investigative reports. I mean, my wife's a junior high school teacher. I showed her, and she gave a C minus to one of their investigative reports. I mean, there were grammatical errors. It's just a couple pages long. It's continuous, right?
Yep.
But here's the thing that frustrates with me with Maersk and MSC and some of these others is, and I hate to say it, but they are very dismissive of America, saying that we have lost control, we have lost the yoke, we are falling behind. Look, our merchant marine is rusting, it's dying, and everything else. And that's all true, but we're now number one in finance. We're now number one, arguably. I mean, gCaptain and Maritime Executive, a few others, and Maritime Influence Publications. I think we're number one, and like I said, with the flag states, Liberia and Marshall Islands, and we're number one. A lot of the Coast Guard still has a lot of influence in IMO, and I could add on and on and on to this, but Maersk needs to, and they have a lot of influence. Look, we've talked about it before. When they come into the port of Newark, when they come into the port of Long Beach, they make demands about dredging and bridge heights, and suddenly American taxpayers spend billions. So Maersk has the political power, but they're not pushing for MARAD for a strength. And this is our opportunity to get together. We have a strong MARAD administrator, and I think, I'm not bullshitting anyone, I think you would be the best candidate here. But if we can get behind this.
Only if I can wear this shirt during being MARAD administrator. That's my one rule.
But it's about having the knowledge and the information and the communication skills. right?
Well,
There are
it,
probably people who know more than you, but they're not communicating it every day on
well,
Twitter like you are.
you're right.
There are Twitter people who are great at Twitter, but don't have the core information. But my point is, they are hurting themselves and they are hurting the environment by being dismissive of the United States. And let's go to the technology too. Where's the technology up?
Yeah.
Maersk wants to know, what are we doing in 10 years? I don't know. We can't invest. The richest men in the world, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, are both ship owners. They have missile recovery ships for their missile recovery. Why aren't they at the table? That's Maersk. If we have Maersk helping to push a MARAD chief as MARAD chief with access to the White House, Biden doesn't bring MARAD in, but Trump did frequently. They had a maritime desk in the White House. And the White House has the ability to demand people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos come in and sit down and work on these problems. But
we need ship
Maersk is not going to go in and they say MARAD's broken. And then Americans too. I talk to a lot of ship owners. They say, John, just give up on this MARAD dream. It's broken. Well, that's not a good enough excuse. It's like Greta says, yeah, it's broken. Let's fix it. And maybe that's the ship cam in me when you got a broken crane or a broken.
Well, you don't write it off. And I agree with you. You don't write it off, because if you look at the press, for example, that the CMA Marco Polo just got running down the east coast of the Canada and the United States from Halifax all the way down. She's in Savannah and heading down to Florida next. Here's the biggest ship to hit the East Coast. And man, you want to talk about ports rolling out the carpet for this vessel. I mean, just, I watched Georgia ports bring her in the Savannah and the amount of, attribution they gave to this vessel, which is
billions of dollars of taxpayer money.
Yeah, exactly.
Nishan from his Harvard graduate school, he goes, you got to remind people. He continuously pushes me to remind people that these are taxpayer funds, and this is part of what makes Maersk successful. Is they are too big to fail, and if Maersk goes down, Denmark's going down. If Denmark goes down, the EU's going down.
Well, and
it's
even
too
Maersk,
big to fail.
But even
Maersk
Maersk has shown
it up.
Even Maersk has shown their independence. I mean, they shut down the shipyard at Odense. They moved everything over to Korea now. Even Denmark should be worried about this, because even the Danes are taking even the Danish officers off their vessels. I mean, Maersk is, used to be, that it was all Danish officers. You would have all the Danes on board. Now there's less of them on board, and they're, again, these companies become these multinational, it's all money, and Maersk can tell me they're not making a profit here, that they can't afford to pay a Dane, Danish fees, Danish salaries to be on the ship. So, I mean, they are an entity.
Back to the U.S. Navy too. I was just talking to a security analysis who had worked at the Pentagon, and he said, well, John, if this shipbuilding is so important, why has the U.S. allowed the shipbuilding to be overseas? I said, where is shipping? Where did we allow it to be moved? It's Japan and South Korea. Where are our highest number of service members? Where do we have the most bases per capita? Do you have how many American servicemen are stationed in Japan and South Korea? I think South Korea is our biggest army base in the world. I mean, it's
at least 30,000 at least over there and everything.
And they say the U.S. has no thing, but part of it is, and it's not necessarily a good thing if you read, of the corporate colonialism and some of this thing, but it was a lot of this. The flags of convenience were designed by the U.S. military. The shipyards were packed it up and sent to Korea and Japan by the U.S. military. And no one's going back to that, but we need to go back in order to go forward and fix this environment. So Captain Tom and Maersk, let's get the Maersk board in here, and let's you, me, and Captain Kata Cruises and Lena Gothberg talks about this. Sal, let's all get together and someone's got to pay the bill for us to fly, but let's go to Washington. Let's go to Brussels.
You and I listen to Lena's, you and I listen to Lena's podcast, Lena Gothberg on the Maritime Shipping podcast had, Captain Tom, Captain Kate on board. And which I found the most interesting thing I actually found about that was that Tom is on the board of Maersk. They got a shipmaster on the board.
And actively sailing captain.
And actively sailing. That's right. he had to give up, you know, one of the
I don't
Maersk
know how
triple
he does it.
E's.
I wish I could still sail and run
Well, he
gCaptain.
gave up. He talked about the fact he gave up one of the Maersk triple E's to do a feeder ship, you know, around, you know, in the Baltic,
And an
basically.
icebreaker.
Right. He's on one
Yeah.
of the ice ships. Exactly right. But he's right there, so he can take part, which I think is fascinating. It's like that's exactly what you want. You don't want to put him in charge, you know, but you want his say on the board and intake, and that's always been my issue. Is you don't, you know, I don't know why we think that every shipping company in the United States needs to have a general or an admiral on it who know nothing about it, even if they were an
And no
MSC commander,
captains. Yeah.
you know, or Marad or Transcom. You know, I just think it's completely disconnected
I got
from.
my master's license and then I got my MBA online. I thought, and my buddy and I did, you know, my best friend, he doesn't like the press, so I won't mention his name, but best man at my wedding. And we both got, we said, and he was a couple months ahead of me, 6 months ahead of me in the program. Said, man, we're going to get our MBA and we're going to have a master's license, master's degree. We're going to conquer the world. And then he graduated, and I don't know, you know, we were making close to 200,000. This was a long time ago on drill ships. And he's being offered $60,000 job, entry-level jobs by these shipping companies.
Yep.
And he couldn't leave. And I ended up leaving my MBA because it's when I started gCam and I had my son. So I still have 5 credits left in my MBA, and I haven't seen the need to finish because the shipping companies don't offer that. They don't incentivize that.
Yep. No, you know, I talk from experience from military Sea Lift Command. There's no transition, you know, way to transition from the ship to shore, you know, without starting over, you know, and you know, you're really gonna take a master and put him down at a GS 10 or 11 or 12 position, you know, anywhere
And the
else, you
Navy
know.
does that a little bit, allowing them to serve a year as active duty, and that's good. But I know, you know, at the command center Bahrain, there's usually a captain. I know there's an active duty Navy guy who's usually an MSC captain at
But even
Marad.
then, you know, you get an MSC master and then he's a lieutenant commander, you know,
All
or
temporary.
commander, you know, and he's not an 06, you know, which again is to me one of the problems, you know. It's you diminish their value because you don't want to give them the equivalent Navy rank. And again, if there was something separate than the Navy, like the maritime service, I would think that would be the issue. You know, you're a captain in the maritime service. You know, it's the same as being a captain in NOAA or a captain in Coast Guard, you know, or the public health service. You know, you make it separate. You know, when you take I mean, I know guys who are masters at MSC, and again, they're lieutenant commanders in the Navy Reserve because they didn't punch some button, they didn't go do something, and it's just it's why do that? You know, why be diminished? You know, now you're being told, you know, how to act by, you know, someone who doesn't understand your career, which I think is again, I can get off on that a whole other way.
And it just goes down the spider web. We were talking before
Yep.
the show about how all these new STC requirement. Now there's leadership and excellent course I got to
Oh,
take. And I ended up, my license was up last year. I put it on hold because it would have been thousands upon thousands of dollars and weeks of my time to take these courses. And then you're getting back to the, you know, express fire, where are those hardcore firefighting classes? It's still the same basic, you know, go in and spray a little thing that we had 20 years ago. They haven't improved that. They haven't improved ERM. Those are the things that prevent incidents, not these leadership and excellent classes. And I don't even know what the hell else they got now. But
well, I mean, they have the piracy class. They, you know, cyber now is the thing, and it's too much. I mean, I had to let my license go because there's the amount of money I would spend to maintain my license is a liability, you know, because I'm not going to generate money from it. It's just me shoveling money away. And yes, I can join the SSO program and do it, but you know, when I left, the SSO program didn't exist. It was the MMR program at the time, and based on my eyesight at the time, I couldn't get into it. Even though I had a merchant marine license, I couldn't get into it. So it's just it's definitely something that needs to be done. Hello, General Alliance at Transcom, you know, Admiral Wetlaufer at MSC. You know, you
pay
need
for
mariners.
these classes. You pay for these classes, and that's their number one concern. In time of war, we don't have the mariners. Well,
Yeah, this is
pay
why
for
you don't
these
have mariners.
classes. Give them a uniform, give them very basic veteran benefits for not even for them, for their families. So if they get shot, the family gets taken care of, gets basic college and medical. And then people will join.
Yep. I mean, I just did a video on my YouTube channel on the Merchant Marine in World War I, World War II, and Vietnam for Memorial Day. You know, and there's a guy I know up at Acre Shipyard up in Philadelphia. He's doing compiling a list of merchant mariners who died in the Vietnam, 169. He has on there. They're not on the wall at the Vietnam Memorial again. And again, they're definitely different. They're definitely unique. Let's talk about this, John, because I think this is the other story I really want to kind of get into here, is just the escalating freight rates right now, and the amount of money it's taking to move goods around the world. So this story here from Bloomberg that you guys have on gCaptain: container freight rates top $10,000 from Asia to Europe. This story, which is, I think, the harbinger of a bigger problem here. Delays expected at China's Yantian port on COVID outbreak, one of the biggest container terminals in the world. We're seeing Long Beach and Los Angeles are broadcasting, hey, we're catching up. The line off the port is shrinking. Well, it's about to get big again, because ships aren't coming across the way they were because of this story right here. And then you have
and then on top of that, this story I give you a little hell for in my text, but to let you guys know, there's a couple maritime blogs, and some people think, some have been around for a while, that steal stories and pretend they're their own. So I won't say who's doing the stealing, but they stole Freight Flow's story about, which Gregory Miller did just a phenomenal job talking about the cost of the actual containers going up. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, there was it. I think it's 3 Chinese companies right now have cornered the container building containers, which are steel boxes. It's not I hate to say, it's not rocket science. This should be something that any country can pump out and do and make containers. But basically now 3 Chinese companies have basically cornered the market.
And they used to. I remember when the training ship went to Denmark, it was the year before I got there, but they got a tour in the late 90s of all the shipping container. And supposedly those factories have been closed, and Sealand had its factories in the US.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, if you look at, again, this.
Well, let's get back to a military problem too. Like, if we don't have containers.
Yeah. That's a bit of a problem. It's a bit of an issue when you don't have boxes to put stuff in. I mean, again, you look at this kind of, Lego box, yard here. What's missing from here is all the labels on the side, and that's something you always saw. You see the side of a vessel, it's got all the colored boxes, but it has names from the companies. But now these Chinese companies, again, a lot of companies aren't building their own boxes anymore. They're leasing them. Or better yet, they're shifting it over to the carrier. To the shipper. Let the shipper get their own boxes. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to track boxes. I don't want to deal with this stuff. I'm just going to run the vessels. And
it amazes me the amount of, the value of these boxes and how often they get lost in these yards. And none of them have, like, I got a air tag. I just got Apple, but before that I had Tile. And I got a little one that goes in my wallet or my keychain. I put on my phone, it beeps, tells me if it's gone. Someone else rides their bike by my air tag, and it pops up on the phone. Here's your air tag.
I can't tell you how many work sites I drive past here in North Carolina, because they're building houses like crazy down here. But you go to these new developments, and they're boxes, Yangmin, MSC, Maersk boxes, just sitting there. And I always think about the fact that's like, that's on a list somewhere that's lost. Somebody.
None of them that we don't even have. These are little devices you could just stick on, and as you're driving your little car by the site, it would pick it up and look through Apple and send it. And man, we don't have any tracking on these boxes.
No,
the number.
Not only there's no tracking on them, I don't think the other story, it's not told enough. I think is there's no inspection on these boxes to see whether or not they're safe. I think that's an issue that we see.
Go back to the Express and the acid, and we kind of knew that what was in that, and they figured out what was in the other boxes. It's not just the acid; it had to leak into something else and cause that reaction.
Right. And I think, that's that story you had with the three companies building containers, and then this escalation of freight rates, is the other one here is how expensive it is getting and everything. And even though the advertised rates are if you look at advertised rates, they're high, but they're not astronomical. But now companies are charging these premium rates. If you want your goods shipped in front of everybody else, it's gold, it's silver, it's platinum, it's double platinum, it's all these different rates you have. And it's really getting astronomical to move stuff around. And again, we're seeing ships at capacity.
Which means
right now.
Everything you're about to buy in Amazon, Walmart, and everything else is about to get astronomical.
Well, and then container companies will blank a sale. They'll just not sail a vessel to increase those freight rates even more. Hey, we're not going to
slow down, or
slow down, or slow steam, hey, we gotta save money, fuel costs are up. We got to save money. So we're going to slow steam. And I think, the minute Los Angeles Long Beach gets caught back up, they're going to be back in the same situation again, because they're either going to be flooded with ships coming in.
You're wrong. You're wrong because, and I'll say, everyone thinks you have to get these containers off in port and they got to go on trucks and they got to go on trains. And as you know, I started G-Ships. It's not about the movement of boxes. We have to work on the distribution and the short sea shipping. There's opportunity to take those boxes off, or you can even take them off on barge right in the harbor at Anchorage, where all these ships are anchored, and you can move them up the coast to Morro Bay. You could move them up to down to San Diego. And Marad's wants you to know they're supporting this.
Marad's got you covered,
John. They got a solution.
Marad's got you covered. I mean, $11 million in grants for the American highway system. $11 million. From the year 2010 to 2018, China spent $132 billion on shipbuilding subsidies. $132 billion.
What year did Austin Powers come out with that movie? Like, we're holding the world ransom for $10 million. It's not really a lot of money to.
But this,
what the hell is Marad thinking?
Can I go clear? I went back and looked at the amount of subsidies we gave the shipping from 1936 to 1990, because somebody asked me this question. It's like, well, we heavily subsidized the maritime industry. From 1936 to 1990, we provided a grand total. This is construction and operational subsidies of grand total, again, of $12 billion. Again, China in 8 years have given $132 billion. In that same span, 2010 to 2018, we gave the United States Maritime Administration under Title 11 gave little less than $77 million. $77 million. And you really have to start asking the question is like, okay, how serious are we? A story we were talking about before the show is the Navy budget came out. The Department of Defense, had their budget come out. The Biden administration released their budget on the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. So, whatever's in that budget is good news, because if you release something into the news on the Friday before a long weekend, man, you're trying to bury something in there. And what they buried in is that the entire Navy shipbuilding fund is 8 vessels. 4 of them are combatants, 4 of them are logistics ships, 2 tugs, a survey vessel, and an oiler. But
what's that going to cost us?
Oh God, I don't even know what that's going to cost us. We're going to cost us some huge amount of money to get 8 ships.
And can you talk about South Korea's shipbuilding program?
Oh, dude, it's night and day. The issue with the Ever Given is Egypt wants, they initially wanted 916 million. Now they're down to 550 million. And Evergreen's gone back to him and said, we only paid 150 million for the ship. You realize that, right? We're not going to pay you more than what we paid for the ship. It's like, there's no way we're paying more. We'll just build another one. It's that easy. We'll write the cargo off as a loss, pay the insurance, and then we'll just build a brand new one. It's the amount of difference here is just fascinating. And again, it becomes this issue in the United States of building ships is we don't build ships, we build works of art. And the reason I call them works of art is because they're one of a kind. They're, when all you're building is one ship at a time.
Change orders. You go to Korea and they do not allow changes. Yep. We had a major change when I worked there for a year in Samsung Yard, and we had a major change that there were regulatory issues that had to be done, and we had to change the location of this intake valve. And said, sorry, you want change? We sell your ship to someone else and you get on the back of the line. We just don't do changes. And yet on the Navy ships, you got some cases 30 people on a carrier and they can all shut down the work and they're just changing.
They contract before the design's done. They like bid,
during the design and after the design, and they're ready to go and they're just the amount of changes.
This is me contracting to build a house without the house design being done. Hey, build me a house. How much is that going to cost you? Like, well, here's what we think it's going to cost you. And then the minute you start adding stuff, the minute you start adding anything, it starts getting expensive, and unless you do it, beforehand. And again,
what frustrates me too is, and I got on your friend's case, and he's a great guy, Kevin at Marad, who was at the hearings, and man,
Kevin Tokarski,
Kevin Tokarski, I said he was a shining light of the truth and what was going on. I like that. But when asked to fix it, he's like, we need more money for Title 11 loans. And I'm like, have you talked to Wall Street? Because again, the Deloitte Shell study, there is hundreds of billions of dollars that
Yep.
the banks are like, please let me spend, but the hoops you got to jump through. And this goes back to what's that book that we both love about the Maritime Administrator, Forgotten Ocean or whatever it is.
Yep. Abandoned Ocean.
We don't want subsidies.
Yep.
The
No.
banks and the shipping companies and they want to pay for themselves. They want to, but they don't want all these archaic and crazy rules associated with it.
Well, I mean, that's like, one of the things that's in the budget is this Sea-Lift recapitalization. They got money to buy 2 ships. Now they got money to buy 7 ships, but they don't have money to buy 7 ships. They have money. They think they can buy 7 ships with the money they have. They can't buy 7 ships.
They didn't talk about the fact that the price of ships has
shot up dramatically. Again, let's wait for the moment when it gets most expensive to buy a ship, because the Navy thinks, well, the price of ships don't change. It's all, or worse, it'll get low, it'll get less. The longer we wait, it'll cost less. It's like, no, car carriers brought every car carrier back out. Car carriers are full capacity right now. And what's ironic is they have a system they can use. Tokarski talked about this in the hearing. We used to have this program where we subsidized ships, and then we would get those ships at the end of their, towards the end of their life, and stick them in the ready reserve force. They got the maritime security program. They got 60 ships out there.
We don't even have to do that. The banks, and I've talked to the bankers, and like you say, you go to a CMA conference once a year in Connecticut. There's all the bankers and Marine Money and Jim Lawrence, and I've talked to him. And then you talk about all these cybersecurity threats, and you have Hudson Analytics and Marianne Cyber, 2 friends of mine. I've talked to, but all of these little groups, they don't really have access, especially in the United States, to definitely not the U.S. Navy, definitely not MARAD, and the MERS of the world is not pushing the EU to come. We all got to get in room to fix this together, because these banks, they've said, we will subsidize, we will completely pay for the renewal of the U.S. flag ship, and you can have mariners on it, and we can talk about build requirements, all that, but it's highly risky. Something like at least 1 in 10 of these are going to go bankrupt, and we don't want to be stuck with a loan. So they'll fund 10 ships for every one that the Navy takes. So the Navy can, if they just say, we'll cut the red tape for you, and we'll help you get these loans out, and if they go bankrupt, we'll take them into the MSC foot. They don't even have to build it.
Yep.
They just have to absorb they don't even have to pay money. They just have to absorb the bankruptcy, which the bankruptcy courts and the U.S. has to do anyway, right?
And I'll tell you, the reason that they shy on this is because the last time they tried to do this was back in the 80s, and they got these build and charter contracts to build these maritime prepositioning ships and these tankers. And they were the worst written contracts I've ever read, because, they're written by government lawyers, not maritime lawyers, number one. And so they also wrote these contracts when inflation and interest rates were in double digits, and so they were just escalating, and they had a cancellation.
And they required a lot. Like, I know NASCO was, they kind of pushed, they didn't even want to do civilian, and they made them, right?
Yeah.
These civilian
and so, I mean, there was a lot of money in there. And again, it wasn't smartly done, and they just didn't bring in experts into the field to come in there and broker this like they should do. I think what MARAD is doing right now with the National Security Multi-Mission Vessel, the new training ships for the state maritime academies, is maybe the start of a good idea. I don't think it's a perfect idea because of some of the things they're doing with that. But, the idea of getting a civilian contractor out there to manage it, to oversee it and do it, use a civilian yard to build it, that's an idea. They have expertise. They got ships that are being operated for them.
Letting the Koreans run it, is that a good idea? Because I heard a story that there's this one equipment manufacturer that built a factory. They're European. They built a factory in the U.S. to do American Jones Act ships, and now that factory in the U.S. can't bid on safety equipment of the training ship, because they're not in the Rolodex of the Korean yard, which is managing it. So we're getting all of the equipment from overseas,
which is crazy. I mean, that kind of stuff needs to be.
This is what the Navy can do. This is what the Navy, they can cut through this bureaucracy, work, but Captain Thomas, it's going to take you, Captain Key. Look at the influence that what does this have to do with cruise ships? And Captain Key, I'm sure she would say, what does this have to do with me? But look at the influence of opening up Alaska. There's political influence here, and that's what people don't realize. Maersk has a tremendous amount of they can force billions of dollars of taxpayer money to do bridges. The cruise industry can force open an entire state and go against centuries old laws. But we all have to work together at this. And it's not just military, but we can do the environmental. And guess what? Everyone also wants diversity, right? I mean, Captain Thomas is a gay captain. Look at all the amount of students and gay individuals who look up for him. Those are the role models we need. We need more Captain Kates. We need more a black officer like Captain Roy Love, the U.S. Navy, who just wrote an article for gCaptain.
Great piece. Yeah, great piece talking about that and everything. And I agree.
Can't do it as MERS. You can't say, oh, that we're not dealing with the U.S. Navy because we don't like them. We're not dealing. And that's, as an American, it feels a little bit arrogant, but I understand where it comes from, because we do come across as arrogant ourselves, and they don't want to work with us, and we have screwed up ourselves. But
and I think that comes through in what we saw with the Jones Act waivers that were granted during the Colonial Pipeline shutdown, and then with the waiver that was given for the Passenger Vessel Service Act for the Alaskan cruise. They went to MARAD, but MARAD has a temporary administrator. She's fine. She's a Capitol Hill staffer who's done great work in her area, but she's not a maritime expert by any means and everything. And I don't mean to be.
She's fine. I think she's way over her head, and nothing against her. I think she'd do great at MARAD, but you need FAA is run by a captain, and the MARAD needs to be run by a captain.
And what got me about the whole issue was, especially like, for example, for the Jones Act waivers, they were not necessary. There's no way you can prove to me they were necessary.
Political influence. You look at the unions and then the amount of the working relationship over the years between our Vice President Kamala Harris.
I heard from a friend who looked at these waivers that came in. The minute the announcement came out that there were a potential for Jones Act waivers for tankers, the Department of Homeland Security, which was the one that was the clearinghouse for this, got a waiver for the Colonial Pipeline shutdown that runs from Texas to New Jersey, for a waiver to move fuel from Texas to California. It's just like, it's the minute they smell that, that group who has a big lobby, and it's the oil companies who have these big, huge lobbies, they went in full force. And unfortunately, the oil companies, who, again, I've talked to, people in the oil companies, they didn't want to say anything out loud, because they were worried about they would be blamed for the Colonial Pipeline, for the shortages, that somehow it would be and that's exactly what the opponents of the Jones Act did. They focused on, hey, it's the Jones Act is the reason you're in a long line getting gas. It's not. It had nothing to do with it. It had nothing to do.
I talked to a number of insiders in MARAD, and they say, Busby provided some of what they call top cover in the military, where you are allowed to go out and say things.
Yeah.
And I mean, we won't say who, but Sal got a little nastygram about something he was saying in here. That's it's like they're talk to guys in marriage. Said, well, I'm not allowed to go out. Whenever I talk to a source, first thing, it's off the record, and don't let this leak. And everyone's scared of their jobs. And I don't think it's just MARAD, it's the Navy too, and a lot of these other organizations. And
well, unfortunately, what needs to be done is, and we see this across the entire maritime industry, not just the United States, but in Europe and Asia and across everybody, is dialogue is good. We had this discussion before that, I wish these companies would say more and be more proactive in what
they are
want.
Saying. They're saying they get Deloitte and Shell and Goldman Sachs are saying we got $100 billion to give you.
Yeah,
I mean, again, making it very difficult for them to get the money. Making it very difficult for them to write the check. They can't write the checks because IMO is being a pain in the rear. So.
We need a maritime Shark Tank. I mean, for God's sakes, Shark is in water. I mean, why do we not have?
Lena can do it. Lena, get us all together, Lena. But we got to spend some time in the Pentagon. We got to spend some time in Wall Street. We got to spend time in Brussels and in Copenhagen too. And Singapore and in Korea, these shipyards. We got to we need a world tour.
Well, and unfortunately, what you're seeing right now is, again, the Japanese shipyards.
There's got to be money behind it.
Yep.
Something else that, talking to Lena about this and other people is like, Captain Kate, most followed mariner in the world in social media. Captain Tom's got all these followers. gCaptain's got 250,000 on Facebook and everything else. And you know why? It's because we all spend a lot of GCAM writes thousands of dollars to checks in Facebook and Instagram advertising every month. Maersk has an entire marketing division. Cam Kate's got the entire her entire cruise companies
Yep.
have
Hey,
professionals.
got my Maersk
and they're
container ship right
writing
up there.
checks.
Got my little Maersk container ship right up there, and everything from
Right.
Lego.
But
So,
you can't. They want to do all this, but you need these influencers,
Yep.
and you gotta write. I mean, checks, and you know, no one wants to advertise, and that's
well, and I can listen.
not
I can
gonna cry
testify.
my story at GCAM, how they all want to free PR and they don't want to advertise, but
And I can testify the fact that, I mean, there's
you need
people
to
that
write
want to
checks.
well, and people want to hear this stuff. They do want to hear it. I mean, I have a market for, all of a sudden, people are following my YouTube page, they're following the videos I post, which are short information videos. They're nothing great. They're not very
Not some, thousands.
well,
Thousands.
and again, that means there's people
Your
out there
video
with it.
last week, one video got 22,000 views.
That was the one, the second ship, the Maersk Esmeralda that went aground.
And then this
in the
week, you had a
Suez.
40-minute one that I almost fell asleep on over it. You got 5,000.
Thanks, John. It's not boring. It's just John, his
No,
attention.
it's not.
It's
It's
John's
good.
attention.
It
It's
is
just,
good.
it's not what it is. When I talk history with John falls asleep. So, John, on that note, I think we've covered the gambit again
Oh,
in
I hurt
another
your
G
feelings,
Captain
man.
Weekly. I think we've definitely covered all the bases. So for everyone who's watching, number one, I think if you want this quality of information and entertainment at the same time, the best thing for you to do is to subscribe to G Captain on YouTube, so that number one, you'll be alerted about new videos when they come out. Hit that bell. This way, when the latest G Captain Weekly comes out. Hit subscribe, give it a thumbs up so that other people can be informed about it. Share it. Let other people know about the maritime industry.
And if you work for a big shipping company, tell your chief marketing officer they should have we're still looking for a sponsor for the ship.
We're looking for sponsors and everything. I'm looking for a sponsor for my YouTube channel all the time and everything. But John, of course, is looking for G Captain. We are always aiming to make it higher quality, more information for everybody.
I'm running out of papers to write IOUs. So.
I got him. Don't worry, John. I got a whole list here. I got a big stack of them over here of what you owe me and everything. So I was jealous when you were telling me how much thousands you paid people. I'm like,
Not people. I pay a person, Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh, well, okay.
Evan Williams. People.
I'll talk to Zuck later on and see what I can get from him and everything. So we'll see what we can do. All right. Well, for this week's G Captain Weekly, I'm Sal Mercogliano. That's John Konrad. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode of G Captain Weekly.